Dia Gwits from Corja. Welcome to Tales from the Land, a participatory community research project where we, the Green Step community, are inquiring into the 21st century realities of food production, farming and living well with the land.
I'm Mel.
And I'm John.
And we're your hosts.
In these podcasts and online events, we'll use the arts of conversation and storytelling to listen, learn and create new understandings of one another and the multitude of approaches being used to engage with the complexities of the climate and biodiversity crises we find ourselves living in. As we go, we'd love to hear from you about your experience, struggles, ideas and visions for a sustainable, prosperous and just future for all. Please send us your ideas to thegreenstep3@gmail.com and we'll include what emerges as we engage with policy consultations for land use in Ireland. Our ancestral practices of tending to the land are rooted in our Irish culture, heritage and language. How can we weave these rooted wisdoms together with modern solutions for sustainability? We'll meet with you and a variety of folk to explore these questions together. We intend to listen and learn from the tales of the land and see where the journey takes us. Dia Gwits, McCargy, and welcome to episode 6 of Tales from the Land. Today, John and I are coming to you from my garden, which is fitting. It's where we started, with the harbour, some birds singing. Any idea what they are?
That is a finch of some sort. I can see him. Again, my bird calls, I wish I was better on them as far as I know it's a chaffinch.
Me too. Okay. We're assuming a chaffinch. And again, being in the harbour, being in a neighbourhood, there's sounds of clanking and crashing and someone mowing a lawn or doing something, and we're just going to go with it. This is life, and life isn't always a perfect audio of bird sounds. So I'm going to do my best to let my frustration go. The first time we recorded, we couldn't do that, and I was sitting inside in the kitchen, sheltering ourselves from all the noises. But instead, we're welcoming them to you and to our ears, and this is life.
Life is messy as it's meant to be.
Yeah,
so is nature.
Exactly. And if anything, we've been becoming very intimate with that experience in these episodes, and also how the messiness of life, how little it engages well with the systems, the man-made systems we're in, namely capitalist and the economy. Like, I think we're really seeing the duality, the challenge. There's also that was a wheelie bin being rolled in, I think. Yeah,
it was. It's a Friday morning. That's where the bins get brought in Cove.
Yeah, it's interesting too, actually. My mom mentioned it. My mom works at Green Schools. Brigitte is her name. Shout out to Brigitte if she's listening. She said, are we going to talk about food waste? And it hasn't really come up yet, no. But it is very much part of the food system. So the bin rolling in there kind of is reminding me of that's a very real part of this system that we haven't given much attention to.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Again, if we're thinking about the food that's created on Earth, about 50% of it does get thrown out before it ever, between farm and consumer, but 50% of it gets thrown out. Because
of these ridiculous systems?
Yes.
I've worked...
Also, stupid legislation that dictates that you can't have vegetables that are oddly shaped, which I don't understand.
At all. And
a perfect carrot? What the hell does a perfect carrot look like? It's a carrot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's perfect in its imperfection. Absolutely. And not only that, but like I remember I worked in Costa. Very challenging job for me. Led to a breakdown, which I'm very open about, but being in that system was really challenging. And part of that was that, say, the sandwiches had a use by date, and anyone should know, best before date. So best before means if you eat it after the best before date, the bread might be a bit staler, it might not be the freshest, but it'll be grand. You know, it's not like it's going to kill you, whereas use by is kind of things for like milk and dairy. It's like, after this date, chances are it will be gone off. You'd probably be unwell if you eat this. Don't eat this. So use by, especially in systems, you can kind of understand a bit more why, okay, we need to get rid of that now, even though I would still trust my nose over a date on a carton.
I'm a terror for it. Yeah. I don't look at dates on cartons. We have noses and mouth, so we can taste it. If you've ever tasted gone off milk, you're not going to mistake it for good milk. Let's be honest here.
Absolutely. Although I do find there's a challenge then there for me with fermented food. I think you said people call it smelly old food.
Yeah, again, there is, because you have to... Again, if you have only ever used use by dates or best before dates, and you've never actually smelt food and don't know what gone off food actually is, that can be tricky.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to make that mistake. And then, but again, even if you eat something that's gone off, within 10 minutes, you're like, oh, there's a grumbling there, and then that wasn't good a plan.
It's actually part of I feel like it's been part of my individuation and my initiation into adulthood and being a woman who trusts my intuition. When I was a little girl, I was so paranoid about that. I'd smell it in the fridge, and I would never trust myself. I'd always have to go and ask my mom or dad and say, does this smell gone off, rather than just trusting my gut. Whereas now I just know, I trust my body. But we're so trained to not trust our bodies and to trust a use by date more than our nose. That feels like it's been a big process for me, actually, is to trust that. But then of course with fermented food, it's kind of meant to smell sour because it is, but it's healthy bacteria, which is interesting because we're speaking next week to Niamh, or the week after next, episode 8, with Niamh from Plentitude Ferments, all about fermented food. So that'll be a really interesting episode, and that's food preservation. And I guess we might touch a bit on food waste there, but maybe it's just worth that we've named it here, and even if we don't dive in, it's a very real and present part of the food system. And groups like Food Cloud and and I think food sovereignty, which has come up again and again, talks a lot about how the more you have a localized system, the less you have these big chains where food gets lost along the way, and you have loads of food left in a field after harvest, or you have weird shaped carrots thrown out in a supermarket, or you have sandwiches and Costa that I used to want to give away to homeless people, and they wouldn't do it because they were afraid of being sued. So I'd have to take off the packaging of Costa and wrap it in cling film and then give it away and not let them know where it came from, so that couldn't possibly happen. It was perfectly good food to eat. And actually the way the systems were in that system, and I have no problem calling them out because it was so challenging to work for them. You actually, if you had food waste, right, you'd have to get rid of all the use by sandwiches by the end of the day. You might have, on a bad day, if you'd ordered wrong or you'd predicted wrong or it was a quiet day, you could have up to 20 sandwiches or more, 30 sandwiches, all being thrown out into the bin, even though they're used by, so you can still eat them. And the staff aren't even allowed to eat them. You're meant to keep them in a bag for 3 days in case someone comes to check, and keep all of this perfectly good food and keep it for 3 days and then throw it out to make sure they can see how much is being wasted. I never followed that rule anyway. I was always eating them for my breaks and having things that were a day out of their use by, as if I'm going to throw those away. It was just sacrilegious. It made me feel ill. It actually led to my mental breakdown, being in a system that made that little sense, and then having all of this food as well, full of sugar, wrapped in plastic 3 times, having to upsell cream for 50 cents to the little old lady with her little lemon tart. It was just the inner underbelly of the beast I felt like I was in. Now, smoking a shitload of weed at the time didn't help, I'll admit that, and reading about the existential truth of reality, but being in that food system was so challenging. And the thing is, making coffee and serving people and meeting the customers is lovely. I've worked in other places like Sea Salt down in Cove, which really, they're amazing. Jackie owns it, really focuses on where the food comes from, who's the producer, puts love into her food. She's even told me before she puts Reiki magic into the hollandaise sauce when she's making it. It's made with love from people's hearts, with good quality food. And working there, even though being a waitress or a barista is hard work, was so much more enjoyable. It was the system I was in that made me feel so ill and literally ill. Like, I was very unwell.
Yes, that's... If we ever take a step back and look at what we're doing at times, you can, again, feel, again, unwell at your actions, or unwell at kind of just what has become normalised. Again, I can do one better to what happened in Casca. I worked in a deli where at the end of the day everything was chucked. It didn't matter. And the deli I worked in would never reduce the price because the owner believed that then that would mean that people would come in at the end of the day to get it cheaper. So that never happened. So again, there would be times, and again, you couldn't have a deli half full of food. It always had to be full food because it looked better. So there was always a set amount of waste. You only got in trouble if it was above the set amount, which having a set amount of waste is bad in itself.
Yeah.
And again, staff couldn't eat it either. So there was someone who was fired for eating. I think it was a chicken goujon. Again, it wasn't when I was there. It was just before I was there. But some of the older staff told me the story.
One of the fables: don't eat food now. You might get fired.
One of the fables. But it was a fable that I laughed at until I worked there for about 6 months, and then realised, from other incidents that happened, that's 100% true. And that was the thing. Like, so when you're getting paid less than minimum wage, because I was 19. No, I was 18. I was 18 at the time.
That horrible loophole. It's like, this is your first job. You're unskilled, so we're going to pay you. I had that for a while as well. I got like $6.90 an hour making beds and cleaning a hotel, which is really, again, hard manual labour.
It's good crack.
And they say, you don't deserve a full wage.
Yeah.
After 3 days, I was trained as well as anybody else there. I mean, for God's sake.
Yep.
We've
gone into another part of the system which is a bit messed up, but we shall continue onto the part that we are looking at.
Yeah, but it's good to name. And I was the same as well, working in Pfizer's, everything thrown out. And the thing is, just on that, because I think it's relevant, is, his fear of, then everyone will come in late. Most people are not that calculated. Most people don't think about it that much. And a lot of people have good wages and aren't so conscious about money. And if you're going into a deli every second day for your lunch, you're probably not counting pennies. No. You're going to go in whenever you want because you're not in that scarcity mindset. Whereas the people who might have actually come in the evening might have been homeless people, might have been families who needed it. Like, if you're counting your pennies enough that you're going to show up at the end of a day every day to get cheaper food, like, that's not coming out of a place of being, I'm going to scam the system. It's probably coming from a place of need. I am on the poverty line and I need cheaper food. So, like, even that there is just showing a deeper flaw in the system and a deeper wounding, which is really, it really makes my heart ache, actually, even just naming that and seeing it. But you're right, we're here today to reflect on the process, which is really helpful that we're bringing this in and acknowledging that it's so vast that, of course, there's many things we're missing and that we're not including here. And again, I can hear in the background the drills and the lawnmowers, and it's partially annoying me, but again, we're going with it because that's life. And I hope as a listener as well, you can kind of just listen to that and acknowledge that's life, and also hear the bird song and our voices and the wholeness of all of this.
The totality of life.
Yeah.
There's talking about sound. There is a project that was created in Yellowstone called Soundscapes, where they wanted to capture the sounds of the park.
Jimmy's doing that.
Really?
From Tishkent na Saloon. He was on our second episode.
He's doing it as well.
Yeah, go on, explain what it is. Yeah.
So the idea is that in the world we live in now, we no longer actually hear things. And that sounds strange to say, but because there's so much traffic, noise, cars, planes going overhead, building, construction, you don't actually hear silence. The only time I've ever heard true silence was for 2 minutes when I was cross-country skiing in Yellowstone, and we managed to, so there was a woman who was breaking the trail and I was directly in the centre, so I managed to get above the rest of the group, and so there was about 2 minutes where there was just snow around us, trees around us, and I heard nothing.
Wow.
And it was beautiful but also unnerving.
Yeah. Because
again, I'm someone who tends to be listening to YouTube videos at all times.
Me too. Podcasts all day, every
all
day.
Of that. It's non-stop. And so then it was so odd to hear silence.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, people have said, and people are asking about birds in cities. You guys like, why is there so much bird song? Oh, we haven't heard it before. What's all this? Is there more birds in the city now because of the pandemic? And it's like, maybe, because it means there's a bit less pollution and more of the insects have survived, and that means there's more birds. But the real answer is that they've always been there. It's just you couldn't hear them. You couldn't, because the outside noise is so strong. So then Soundscapes, what they do is they recorded all of these so that they be kept for posterity, because they realise that with the increase in air travel, with the increase in motorisation, more motorways everywhere, there will soon come a time when we will not hear the natural world.
Well, that, if we've anything to say about that's not going to happen. I'm going to weave us back to our first episode where I shared the lovely word by Glenn Altbrecht, the symbiocene. Let's move from the Holocene to the symbiocene, where we're working in harmony. Something that's really come up for me in these episodes so far that I've noticed as a thread is not just about sustainability and sustaining what's here, but about regeneration and restoration and restoring what we've lost, restoring the health to the soil, restoring the health to our communities, restoring our faith and trust in each other and our intimacy with life, and that feels very strong. And
it does, but I think it's restore, but it's restoring to something new.
Yeah,
because we can never go back to what we have lost
the
in
new
many cases.
Old way, I
exactly.
think. Yeah, yes. There's elements of the old way. Yeah, like let's have chickens again, let's forage again. But of course, we're never going to go back. But let's still try and preserve those little sanctuaries of places where you can kind of just hear wildness. Like Jimmy's saying in his project, I've been chatting to him about it, and he's going to forests and sitting down, and part of the sounds of a forest now are children laughing and, you know, people having picnics and talking and drilling or hedge cutting. You know, these are now actually becoming part of our environments. And definitely the part there about children laughing, I definitely have a thing. If I go to a wild space, I kind of want to go where no one else is going to be. I don't want to go and have 5 families that I pass and see a bunch of people from town. If I want that, I want to go into town or go to the market. If I go out to nature, I kind of want to be on my own with nature. But I feel like I can sense a softening in myself and having to recognise that actually, humans are nature. And I need to soften to that and not be so kind of a misanthropist or misanthropic, like hating humans. I love when I learned that word, I was like, oh, that's exactly it. There's one thing I just want to say about the comment you made there about listening, and even just about, you know, some people listening to this might focus exactly on that noise of the buzzing in the background and might be so annoyed that you turn off the podcast. You know, I would have been like that before. And it's the same with people's tone of voice. And our friend Hugh, who's holding space at the moment for us as well, he's listened to the episodes and he's chilling in my house while we're chatting. He noticed that, you know, there are some people who are pretty riled up and angry about this, and listening to someone's tone where they're coming from that kind of annoyed place can also be kind of grating on us. And as well, then listening to someone who feels kind of quite conversational, which is certainly the tone I think we try to bring. You know, whether we succeed at that is your own interpretation. But, you know, just acknowledging that when we listen to people, sometimes we need to listen deeper to, like, what do they really mean, and listen past the tone. And sometimes people can't do that. And that can be this personality clash then of like, oh God, no, I can't listen to your man. But if you can actually get past that annoyance within yourself and kind of find a little bit more, breathe into it, try and let it go, try and let go of that sound, and also hear John and I's voice and the birds and the wholeness and the sounds in your own environment, and just listen beyond and listen for the stillness beyond all the sound. You can kind of hear more the heart and the intention of the person talking, not just the annoying tone that you don't like. Or the lovely tone that you love. I have people say that to me about my voice, going, oh, your voice is so soothing, you know. Are you listening for my soothing voice, or are you listening to what I'm saying? Or do you think my voice is annoying, you know? Write in and let us know. No, I'm joking. Please don't. My ego's had enough. This process has been intense. Leave me be.
But you are right. When you're having conversations with people, you need to definitely listen to what they want to say, often rather than what they are actually saying.
Yeah.
And again, you can figure that out quite easily by responding. So once you've heard someone responding, so this is what I think you've said. Am I right in this? Reflecting them.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't reflect, then you can realise that you're using the same words but speaking a totally different language, and then you'll never get any agreement from that.
Yeah, and translating it into your own language, like this is so much about what I'm learning in spiritual counselling in my minister training. Most of it is about how can I reflect for this person that I might be the clearest mirror. And you know that you can reflect the body language they've used, the word that they've used. Someone caught me very, very pointedly recently. They said, you know, you say the word worthy a lot and I'm not before it. And I was like, wow, because I'd been doing so much work on I'm not enough that I never thought to think that I also had a problem with I'm not worthy. And I realised it was this same negative belief in me that was just arising in a different word. And I was like, oh. And it was only because someone had the capacity to reflect clearly for me that I could hear my own words and what I was actually saying. And that created more understanding of me and of how I relate to life. And it's the same with us, like you're saying. When you can just reflect back, I'm hearing this. You're bringing it into maybe the language you would use with the language that person would use. And that's how we create understanding. Like, that's how we create more intimacy in our relationships. And I'm very clear here, intimacy is not just about sex. Intimacy is about deeper relating with a person or a moment. You can be intimate with a breath of wind across your face. You can be intimate with a crab apple flower dancing in the wind. You can be intimate with a person. You can be intimate with putting on your sock or having a cup of tea. And in this podcast, we have been deepening into intimacy with each other, with these people, wonderful, inspiring, amazing, brilliant, beautiful people who are from One Future as an activist, who are from the IFA as a farmer, who are from the Irish Cattle Breeding Society is coming up, or, you know, as ecologists. But we're not just coming as entities of those organisations. We're coming as people who engage with those, but we're also then coming with our own unique stories, which is so beautiful. And it is with that wider nest of these organisations that are spreading out across Ireland, with then the more intimate nest of these one-on-one conversations that we're having, to then meeting with each other's hearts. And it is here where we can have these really special moments. And there's a moment, I feel like this is like a prelude to what's coming up. Do you want to share? It's what happened with you and Diarmuid in that interview.
You can share away.
Okay, so
again, I think why, because sometimes it's often when because again, I didn't notice this. Mel is the one that brought it up, and again, that is what often happens in these things. You are so close to something that you don't actually see it.
Yeah,
and that can happen.
Yeah,
No,
and
continue.
so I'm being a mirror for what I saw in this, and it's beautiful now that I can present this to you now, so you can really be sensitive to this when it happens in the episode next week. John and Diarmuid were talking. We were all talking about water quality in Ireland, and about the pearl mussels, and freshwater pearl mussel, and about the pollution in streams and how that relates to agriculture. And Diarmuid has also studied ecology, but he has a small farm. He's worked in the farming realm. He does. He has this grass measuring system called it's called the Grasshopper, and his business is called moregrass.ie. So he's gone very much into the farming realm. And as they were talking, we were talking about intensive cattle breeding. We were talking about increasing the herd size. We had a very interesting discussion about genetics and everything. And we were like, there was definitely a sense of, John and I were kind of sitting there with a skepticism about, is increasing the herd size a good idea? I don't think it is. I don't think John thinks it is. But we're open and we're listening.
I'll honestly say I don't either.
Yeah, no. And Mark is in that realm, who was also at the episode. And Diarmuid is also very much working with that realm too. So we're just being with that, you know, you might say conflict or friction between our worldviews, which is okay. And in that space, because we created an atmosphere where we had a bit of crack, we shared some food, we had some, we kind of had warmed up. We'd been chatting for about an hour, I'd say, before this was actually able to happen. And John was talking about the pollution of streams. And Diarmuid was able to ask this really beautifully vulnerable question and said, and is it largely being impacted by farming?
Or is farming the biggest issue, biggest cause of water
And
pollution?
John was able to just go, honestly, yeah. And Diarmuid could say, you know, that's really disappointing, but thank you for telling me. And because we had warmed up our hearts to each other, because we'd been listening to each other and having a bit of crack, that vulnerable question of these two conflicting views kind of trying to marry together and see where they mix and where they don't was able to happen. And that's how we can bridge this divide between ecologists saying farmers are doing all of this and they're polluting the rivers, and farmers saying leave us alone, we've enough to deal with, which that's not the whole picture, but in a national discourse that's what we're seeing. And it's only through friendship and trust and a bit of crack agus ceol and a bit of love and time, softening into time, that we can create a space where that can happen. And that happens with deeply listening, like we've just kind of explained. And I think that's a really beautiful moment, and for me
it is.
That's what this whole project has been and is being and will continue to be.
I agree completely. It's a conversation, and a conversation around these issues and speaking to them but not arguing over them, because we've all gotten into arguments with our friends, with our family, with our loved ones. And as you will well know, you've never changed anyone's opinion by shouting or by being angry at them.
You might have gotten to break them down into tears, but that probably didn't do very much to actually help them come around to your worldview.
Exactly, and then you're just left with that continuing argument, and then everyone has feeling annoyed and resentful and all on and on and on.
And let us here use I language, because we have both done this.
Oh yeah, completely.
And we'll do this. We're unlearning it.
Yeah, you
it's not about us preaching, don't do this, all of you who are listening. We are so complicit.
Yeah, you learn from your mistakes, and that has most definitely been a mistake I have encountered many a time.
Me too. Painfully so. The memories I just cringe at. I'm like, oh, did I really say that? Oh no.
But to go back to it then is you have to engage with topics like this over time, and a lot of the
so John is going to keep talking to you while I go and let the dogs out, because they're looking at us so happy, and I want to just welcome them into this moment. So John's going to chat and I'm going to get the dogs. Please continue, John.
My pleasure. So yeah, it's about time. You can't engage with a topic like this for true, especially what you hear in the national discourse. You hear people speaking and it's like 5-minute bite-sized chunks of what's your view, okay, so you don't have the same view, let's fight. And that's basically what it sounds like, and it is idiotic because it doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't help your topics either. Again, conflict sells, and that's why people love it. People love to hear arguments online. Again, we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this as well, like, especially if you go through you're on YouTube and you see someone has an argument comment, and then you click in, you see 200 replies, and you're like, oh, brilliant. And then you spend 20 minutes reading an argument by two people you have never met online, and yet you're really interested in it.
Oh, the juiciness of that, yeah.
Exactly, and so then...
But we're addicted to that. It's so unhealthy. We're addicted to this unhealthy conflict.
Yes.
And we need healthy conflict. We can still enjoy our addiction to conflict.
Yeah.
But rather than just like being a voyeur, like watching it kind of pervertedly, let's be part of it. Let's be part of the uncomfortable moments where you have to bring your true, this is what I believe, how does that engage with yours? And when you realise there's a conflict, rather than running away or shaming the other person or arguing, letting your heart be vulnerable, like Diarmaid did there with his question, is it because of farming? And you said yes. And he let himself feel the of that response. But then we moved forward and deepened into friendship and trust. And that's how we can create change. And we've also been able to be open. You know, I've been letting myself be open to a little bit more of how... let me try and find an example from past episodes rather than forward episodes. Certainly food sovereignty. I came to this, and to be fully honest, as much as I loved and was passionate about land use and farming and local food, I had this scarcity mindset that I can't afford that. It's not in my budget right now. And I am on a tight budget, and that's okay. But so I would just say, I'm terrible at gardening, I'm not good at gardening, and I would go every week to Lidl or Aldi and just get my food and just go, look, that's within my means right now. But in this process, I've had to realise the importance of food sovereignty and how I vote with my money. And even if it means me reorientated my expenditure, which to be honest isn't a lot. I live quite a simple life. I don't buy a lot of things. But if it means me reorientating that a bit, so I have to be a little bit tighter, but that I can make sure my money is spent on markets, neighbour foods, growing my own food. Since the start of this project, I've really let this move me. I have, the front of my sitting room is full of all these plants growing that I'm ready to plant out. We have a vegetable patch put in ready to fill with plants. I've been going to neighbour foods, I've been going to the markets, and to be honest, I've been fucking up royally, excuse my language, but I got a bag of onions, and I just I don't need so many onions, why did I get so many onions? And I'd rather than just asking for one or two, and because I was in a panic and I was in a rush and I didn't make enough time to go, and then I forgot what I needed. And then with the neighbour foods, you have to plan ahead a whole week, and I'm like, what am I going to need by Thursday? I don't really remember, I don't really know. And it's been a jumble. It's different to just going to Lidl or Aldi once a week, getting all the same things every week and just putting them in the trolley and going, right, okay. So then I'm like, how do I have a healthy diet and support local and know what I need? And I'm finding I need to be more fluid in this, and it's uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable. I've noticed I haven't been eating as well because I've been orientating and not having the same ingredients I'd normally have, and I'm having to it's stuttering and it's this opening into a new way of being, and that's uncomfortable. But I'm letting this process move me, and I'm being with that uncomfortable conflict within me of going, okay, really supporting Lidl and Aldi is not what I need to be doing. I need to be prioritising this if I really care about it, and I'm letting myself be uncomfortable in that process.
So you've allowed yourself to have a change.
Yeah. Even though it's uncomfortable for me to change, because growth can be uncomfortable. It is hardly comfortable. Could you imagine, right, a little seed, right, nestled up in a cute little seed, planted in the moist earth, super comfy and cozy, and suddenly this force of expansion arises in you, and you're cracking through yourself, and you're growing up and down, and you're being stretched, and then you poke your head up, and you've been in darkness your whole life, and you poke your head up, and suddenly there's a blazing sun, and there's wind, and there's rain, and there's birds, and there's... Could you imagine how uncomfortable that would be? Or a caterpillar having to wrap itself in silk and not know what the hell it's doing, but having this compulsion of life going, okay. Oh, and also really welcoming Sully and Pippi here.
That's the little dog that's under the table. If you hear any little snorts or barks, joining us.
But yeah, that moment of discomfort of transformation.
And with the butterfly, it's even more than that, because people don't realise, but a butterfly actually dissolves. Yeah?
How uncomfortable. Could you imagine?
It dissolves before it becomes... Well, a caterpillar dissolves before it becomes caterpillar.
There's this beautiful analogy, which I feel so passionate about, and I'm so excited that the conversation is allowing this to emerge, because it's so perfect, right? Is that there's... As a caterpillar begins to do that dissolving process, there's a couple of, they call them imaginal cells, right, that are ready to be the butterfly. There's those cells that are already there that are going to be the butterfly. Imagine being one of those cells that is there to be the butterfly, and suddenly all the cells around you start committing suicide and dissolving and imploding and just dying and becoming mush. Imagine being there, witnessing that, going, what the hell is happening? But having just this light in you of this sense of purpose of I'm going to be something, but maybe not even knowing what, but there's that compulsion to something. And then eventually the more that cell, because of course the cell doesn't have the same conscious thought as us going, oh my god, what's happening? Maybe they do. I would imagine it's still uncomfortable, but I think life is just so natural that it's just part of it. It doesn't have the conflict that we have as humans. That's what I love about animals and dogs and listening to them. They just go with life. And same with the butterfly cells, they just go with life. And then suddenly that liminal cell, that imaginal cell is a butterfly, and suddenly it all makes sense. It's oh, yeah, all makes sense, and it's just life. And I actually really feel like that is a perfect analogy for what's going on in our world right now, as our systems are collapsing and the HSE is being hacked, and and systems are failing, and we're totally lacking any trust in capitalism. I feel like we're in a pandemic of distrust, a pandemic of trust, an epidemic, and it's like, how do we create more trust? And I think our hearts and these conversations are showing that impulse of truth, and it's what came up in the card reading as well, which I'll put out with this episode. If anyone wants to get a more sense of the liminal realm of this project, you can listen to that, and it won't be for everyone, but is that we know we want that community heart. We want to be sitting around a table eating delicious, nutritious food with people we love in a beautiful community that we care about, with like vibrant health and wellness and connection, and we see what we're striving for, but we're kind of like, okay, but how do we get from here to there? And the thing is, we create it in many moments. Like I have that with my family, which is a blessing. And what we've done with this podcast, we're reorientating it that we only have one live event, and then we're going to do a closing ceremony with the people in the podcast. Now, it is our sincere wish that every person who's listening could be with us for that, but next year, when things are more open, that's what we will do, and we hope this will be annual. But for this year, we're going to do a closing ceremony with everyone who's been with us for these episodes, or anyone who wants to be, who's been with us. Not everyone will be up to that, and that's okay, but that's our intention. So we're only going to do one online, because we're shifting away. We're sick of being online. We want to be in person, like sitting next and being able to see John and the textures on his skin, and the way he's twiddling his pen, and the way Sully's moving around on the ground. That's what I desire, an embodied reality, not just online. So that's a shift. But I feel like that's going back to the butterfly, is we're in this time of transformation to create this new old way. And yeah, that's our task. And it feels like a nice time to read a story, maybe. Would you like to read? Are you feeling called to read?
No, I think you should.
I'll read. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As I asked that, I was like, yeah, no, you probably don't want to read. But I love reading. I'm going to give an example of that intonation. I've been getting braver in my storytelling and getting a bit more like, oh, let's get into this now with the characters and the sounds and the audio.
And I think that's happened more throughout all this, because it is the power of storytelling. Throughout all this, all the information that we have heard has been people's stories of the problems that they see, stories of what is happening for them in this world, and what farming means for them, and kind of where they would like to see it changed, or where they see a difference is needed, because humans are irrational creatures, and I am a scientist at heart. I love science. I'm obsessed with facts and numbers.
You love science.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'm
beautiful.
I'm in fact with numbers and data, and that is what I am passionate about. Yet I know completely that you will never change anyone's opinion by throwing facts at them.
But that's why you say you love science. You lead with love in your science. You're a scientist, but not just in the cool, objective way, because that kind of is against ecology in itself, because that's not ecology.
Ecology
you're part
is messy.
of the system, yeah, and you acknowledge the messiness and revel in it.
That's the beauty of ecology. I think it is. One best way I've heard it described, well, it's an allude, but it's there's a thing called silviculture. Silviculture is about managing forests, but they call it the art and the science of managing forests, because there is a lot of art in it. There is a lot of looking and going, yeah, that tree, yeah, we have to move that out. There's too much in this area. I can't exactly say why, but I can see it, and so that is why. Ecology again as well, you have so many interrelations and so many connections between every different part of it, that it's very difficult to show a pure complete correlation between this species interacts with this species, because often it's mediated by this species, and another species is here, another species is here, and then you have the soil microbiota behind it. And I think that really hits towards kind of the problems with policy, almost.
There's no love in policy, there's no messiness. It's like, this is how it is, and then yet it is messy. It's like, this is what we'll say we'll do, but then what actually happens isn't that, and it doesn't allow for that fluidity of life, because it's set in stone or set in paper. There's indigenous peoples who don't want to ever be captured in a book. They don't want their name in a book. I was reading Sand Talk by Tyson Yungaporta, and he says there's some people he's spoken to and had yarns with and story like we're doing who don't want to be captured in a book. They don't want to be set still in that moment in time, because it is so against their understanding of life to freeze something like that. And that's what a book does. It's a capture of a certain moment. A good book will be a living being as well in itself, and then of course it comes alive with each person who reads it, so it is alive in a sense, but the actual book and the written down words are captured in time, and that is so against life. And I feel like that's what policy is, and I'm really struggling at the moment with policy. I am going, what is even the point in engaging? And I know that there is, but all of me as a live, embodied, fluid woman just kind of rails against it and says it doesn't work. You can write down the prettiest list of all of these lovely things that we'll do, and we'll do this and it'll be great, but if it's not done in a holistic way, that you're actually on the ground with people putting it into practice, because it's about 6 ranks away from the people on the ground who are actually going to implement it, then that trickle down from where the policy is written to where it happens is never what it will be. And there's not enough written into policy or that whole process that actually allows it to be a living entity. I just think it fails so drastically in that. It just makes me cringe with just frustration. I just go, ugh.
See, I disagree.
Okay, yeah, go on. Tell me.
It's... For me, I think the issue with policy is the fact that it is not linked between departments. It's not linked between parts of government. So again, you have...
Like ecology.
Exactly. That's the example that I was leading to. Policy, you have... Everyone is within their own silo. Everyone's within their own thoughts. And so you have the Department of Housing will not speak to... The Department of Justice will not speak to... anyone else. You're all inside your own little area, and because of that, then you create a policy that you do not realise has a huge impact on another policy that's happened, because you haven't spoke to each other about it.
Yeah,
that's my issue with it.
And then people are so overwhelmed that they go, no, that's not my department, that's their department. And then they go, no, that's not my department, that's their department. And they have so much on their plates because they're trying to manage a whole system. In a way, is this kind of like, in an archetypal way, is this overly parental kind of controlling way of, no, we'll manage all of this because people aren't kind of clever enough to do it themselves, in a way. It's not just that. But also it's the sense of a protective parent. Well, if we do all of this, we'll mind everyone and everyone will be well, and we'll do this. But it's like this overwhelmed parent. And within that, of course, there is the bad mother. You know, the mother who just goes, oh my God, for God's sake, I wish I could just leave my kids at the playground and never come back. Which most mothers have thought, right? And in a sense, I think there's parts of that in the government and the people in government that go, oh my God, can we just leave it all? It's just too much, I just can't. But then the other side, it is this love. Of course, who would go into that job with, like, the other one's longer, if you want it. Yeah. We're just talking about the headphones. Oh, and that is the frog crickets.
Sorry, I thought we had a frog and I was going to get very excited. But again, no Irish frog makes that sound.
That's
the tree frog from California, where Hollywood is. That's why it's on all shows.
Ooh, that's really good to know. That's my alarm for, at this time, 11:58. Everyone who I'm training with in my ministry tunes in prayer, in silent meditation, and just connects their heart field with everybody else who has taken vows as a minister, and the beauty is we take vows, our own vows, to the God or the divine of our own understanding, and this whole project is me doing my ministry in action. So it feels nice to welcome in that energy of this field of beautiful people who are committed to serving life as a loving, living being, like the way policy fails sometimes, because it doesn't have... I feel like that's a big problem as well. And I know I just left that other train of thought, and that's okay, because that's the way conversations happen sometimes. I don't need to go back and finish that, and I'm sure whatever I've shared is enough for whoever's listened, for whatever that needed. But I feel like that lack of love, that lack of wholeness, like for me, the divine, God, the universe, it is love. Love, that's what it is. That's it, like as simple as that. Like in a sense that it's so simple that people kind of that's too simple. But like, where is the love in the middle of governments? Where is the love for those people who were under immense stress and pressure to write these policy and try and manage all of this for so many people in a whole country and then a whole globe because it's so international? Where is the proper compassionate care for those people? And the same for healthcare workers and ecologists and all the volunteers who were holding everything together. Where is the loving care of a loving mother? Now looking at the other side of it, there's the bad mother and the loving mother. Where is that love and support for the people who are holding all of that stress? And I just don't see it being there. I feel like even 20 minutes of silent meditation for every person who works with policy, or any job actually, and it doesn't need to be silent meditation, but some kind of sense of a collective support, I think is really achingly needed in the centre of our government. Like, what is the heart of our government? I mean, in some sense you might say it's Michael D. Higgins, who's a pretty good heart as far as countries go.
Yeah, you gotta love Michael D.
Which I think it actually stands a lot to us. The philosophy and the love that underpins him, I think, does infuse our government. And that's why I think, in a sense, we are a lot better off than other countries. But then at the same time, there's this sense of contending with these big, huge global corporations who I feel in many cases are heartless. You know, if you're throwing people off your land to do whatever, to make more money, to make more profit, that's not heart-centred, that's not love. And that's my challenge.
Faceless.
Yeah.
I think that's it. When you have an organisation like that, you have so many people that you kind of are just running along on a single track, and you get everyone together and everyone's running along that same track, and it doesn't matter if that track was right and now because things shift and things change, now that track is wrong. You're still running the exact same track because that's all you know.
When actually you need to meander through the forest and go off path and go and visit the river and then go and trek up a mountain and then maybe come back to that meandering path you were once on, but it's going to be totally different and transformed. Like, it's not a running track, it's not a loop that you go and run around. You know, in Cove here we've got the tech field, it's this loop that people run around. There's something in that seems so unnatural to me, to just run around one loop. And I'm not judging anyone who does that. Everyone has their own way, and if you want to run really far and know that if I do this loop 10 times I've hit my limit, that's okay. But that's not how our policy and our life needs to be governed. Our life needs to be governed with that understanding of the off the beaten track, wear the right hiking boots, accept that it might rain and bring good rain gear. You know, we need to be thinking about our whole policy and our whole systems with that complexity.
It's more in policy, it's more about individual empowerment in that case. And more about people taking responsibility for their own lives.
Yeah, maybe we don't need mammy government and daddy God to be, you know, the church, if we're going to use that patriarchal thing. Maybe we don't need these big parental systems governing us all. Are we those little kids anymore that need that system? Can we take that power into our own hands and our own local communities? The reality I see from all the people we're talking to is that is what we are doing. And we are taking that power back.
There's a huge appetite for it too. Again, yeah.
And then I think it comes to, if that's what we're doing, that means we're going to be more intimate with each other in our local communities.
Because you have to be by its very essence.
Yeah, with the neighbour who you don't get on with very well, or with the person who shows up to every town meeting that makes you roll your eyes. But like, how can you connect more lovingly with that person so that the project you're working on together can actually succeed, even though your ego personality doesn't get on with their ego personality? How can we overcome that? How can we be with the healthy conflict to call out something when it's necessary and not just go home and bitch and moan about it to your partner? How can we be together in a way that means we can actually be raw and vulnerable in our questions and in what we're bringing, and accept what we don't know and say, I'm not an expert, what do you know? Like, how can we let ourselves soften into community, that we can create spaces that feel trusting, that feel safe? And my sincere wish and hope and actual, my truth is that that's what we're creating here. We're not doing it perfectly. Nothing's perfect. Jesus, if you saw the back end of all of our admin stuff, you'd kind of maybe cringe a little bit at this. But we get the podcast out every week. We engage with the people we meet with our hearts. We're doing our best. We're not perfect, but we're doing our best.
And that's all you can want.
That's all we can do. Life. Yeah.
That's it. If you strive for perfection, you won't get anything. As a perfection is the enemy of good.
And actually, I love that, because the foundation of the Green Step podcast, back when it was a radio show on UCC 98.3 FM, our slogan was, it's about progress, not perfection. And for me, it's about progress as perfection as we create the new centre. Yeats has a theory in The Second Coming, which I might actually look up to read the poem, but maybe I'll look it up now to read it. So John is actually, I want to share with you about the poem, The Second Coming of Yeats, and actually I would love for you to hear it first properly, and then I can say what I mean from it, rather than just taking a snippet. So John is graciously going to read The Second Coming by William B. Yeats.
Perfect. The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosened, and everywhere the ceremony of the innocent is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand, surely the second coming is at hand, the second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight somewhere in the sands of the desert. A shape with lion body and the head of a man, a glaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, sloshes towards Bethlehem to be born.
Thank you. That's such a powerful poem. I'm going to go and read it again later. And I bring that in because, like, as we were talking earlier about the imaginal cells in the caterpillar who are going to become the butterfly, like, we're in that place where things are shifting. I really think we're in a time of demise, and I referenced it last week, but again, if you haven't listened yet, there's a talk by Bayo Akalomafe on is there a solution to climate change, and he speaks so beautifully about this. Is this a time of demise? And it is. And it's how do we tend to that and be with it. And the start of that poem, Yeats had this theory of evolution which really resonates with my heart, and it feels like where we're at, but that life spirals, right? And it starts at this, and society and civilizations spiral, and they begin with this clear focused thought. Like here in the West, you know, we can go back to Apollonian thought, Plato, Nietzsche, you know, all of these people who've kind of added to this very kind of clear philosophy of life. And that's spiraled, and it's evolved our societies, and it's made it be a certain way, and it's been growing and growing and growing and spiraling outwards. And now we're at this point which he begins that poem with. The centre can no longer hold. The falcon cannot see the falconer. So the falcon, the bird, is flying around the outskirts of this big spiral, and the falconer is in the middle, but it's become so different to what the original philosophy and thought was that it doesn't seem to make any sense anymore, and the falcon can no longer see the falconer. But the thing is, within every one of those spirals of evolution, he reckoned in the centre of that chaos is the next new way forming. And I feel like that's what we are doing here, and that's what we are part of. And that's even in that story, it's beautiful. I love I'm kind of go a little bit shamanic on you there now, but I'm seeing the threads with the card reading that's coming out with this episode as well. We got Petica, who's this beautiful, inspiring woman in Christianity. She like cut all her hair, she baptized herself, she lived till she was 90, even after being forced to be married. They tried to execute her. She just fought her way through life, and because she wanted to be of service to Christ and the love of Christ, of love one another as you love yourself and be loving. And in that card, the lion is there with her as well, and it's all about reclaiming our personal power, which is what we're talking about. Reclaiming our power. Our way is the way, and the more we believe that, and the more, instead of in the poem, what you picked up on is, what was that line you particularly liked?
Yes, it was that the exact line, it's not coming to mind, but what it is it's that those who know nothing continue to speak and shout from the rooftops, whereas those who actually know and and are experts and understand what is happening are afraid to speak because they feel as if they don't know enough.
The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And that's it. And I think...
That's Twitter.
It is Twitter, isn't it? I really hate Twitter. I just can't with Twitter. And I know I should. It's like, it's good marketing. I should put the podcast on Twitter. But oh my God. It makes me want to vomit. I just can't. It's not my cup of tea. But that's the sense, you know, I feel like we are trying to bring the best of us and bring it out, even though a lot of the time the best can be found in stillness and silence and meditation and in the non-saying and the non-being, and that doesn't necessarily want to be loud, but because we're in this time of demise, that part needs to become louder. It needs to become brighter, like a light. It needs to become shinier. And we're back after the dogs scare off the cat and protect their territory. Healthy conflict in action. That's life. But yeah, I think at this point in time, we just need to be brighter. We need to be more present with what we really see is the true centre of love and integrity, and not be egoic about it, but be confident in it, trust in it, and let our trust and our conviction shine brightly, because that's what's needed right now in a time of demise, which can feel really dark at times, the way the world is. We need to be being the light, shining the light of our hearts, the soul light, I would call it, and being with that and letting it be in our vulnerability, letting it shine, which is scary, but needed.
Yes, terrifying is the word I would use.
Yeah.
But
there's one bit on that actually, which is kind of what we want to move to towards the end of this, and we can finish with a story.
Just to say as well, the word terrifying, something terrifying is frightening, but it doesn't have to be something bad that is frightening. As in the Old Testament, God is always described as terrifying, as a terrifying light. So something of so pure and powerful that it frightens you. So although this is a time, it's right to be terrified, it doesn't mean that you have to be saddened by that. That can be enlivening. Fight or flight can kind of give you the energy to move forward into this new path.
And I would say, but we still need to grieve, not get stifled in sadness. But we need to grieve for what we're losing, the species that we've lost, the disconnection that we have, the mental health, the food waste. And this is maybe just to bring in as we close, because this is emerging a lot, and I don't think we need to talk too much about this right now because it's been talked about and it will continue to be. But I just had a realization that, and this kind of comes back to what we were saying at the start about, you know, those people who might come in at the end of the day for the cheaper food. I've been in that place a little bit where my big thing in the last couple of years has been about, like, food is free. Grow your own, plant your own, forage. Food is free. Food is life and it's around us. But now I'm realising I'm stepping into food sovereignty, where it's actually acknowledging the cost of food. There is a cost to food in this industrial system that we're in, and who is bearing the brunt of that cost. And we need to be standing in solidarity with food growers and farmers, and that is key. And cutting out the middlemen like Lidl and Aldi and the big supermarkets like Super Value, who Turlock was telling us, like, he went in and brought his veg and they would only buy it off him if it was sold, which you can kind of understand as well. Like, in a market that's going to happen too. You're not going to be paid unless it's sold, but the fact that then it is out of his hands and he has grown it and produced it, and it is no longer in his hands, and he will only get money then if it's sold and the rest will go in the bin, that's just sacrilegious. Like, if it's in his hands and he goes to the market and okay, it doesn't sell, at least he still has the carrots to either make some food with or pickle and maybe sell as a pickled thing, or sell to someone else, or to give away, or to replant, or do whatever. Then it goes back into the system.
That's the system. That's the system coming to try and crush your dreams.
It makes me go, oh. But it's moved past now, thankfully.
And that's what we hope happens with the system too. Yeah,
let's just let it move past and let us hold our own in a loving space. So that actually, I think, was the bin lorry coming to take away the veg that had been rolled out earlier, which is funny because we were talking about food waste, and that's the beginning and the end. This is the power of ceremony, like, and I love this because everyone can witness this who's listening. Like this, you can't plan this stuff; it just happens. This is life, and we are being with life in its fullness, and it's remarkable. And I'm so enjoying this process, even though it's challenging me and my food and the way I live and the way I am. I feel myself cracking and transforming to be more in solidarity with food sovereignty. That's the key that's coming out for me. What's coming out for you so far?
For me, it's the fact that everyone is saying the same thing, regardless of what it was. Regardless of who is saying it, it is all the same. And what's coming up the whole time is, as you said, food sovereignty. It is.
And anti-capitalism and healthy soil.
Yeah.
And looking at decolonial ways of being like in relationship with the world. I love that we're hearing the beeping here because this is very relevant to come in, because only 2 days ago all of the fishermen went out in their boats to protest. And again, that's food sovereignty as well. They're being forced to weigh all of their fish, take it out of the ice, to weigh it, to let it degrade while it's out of the ice, and then it's something like they have to give like 80% to the European Union because of something with Brexit. They're being thrown under the bus. It's the same thing that's happening with farmers. It's food producers that are just being thrown to the edges, and the food sovereignty movement doesn't just look at farmers and food growers on the land, it also looks at fishermen, and it looks at the whole system. And I think that's really powerful, and that is why we're hoping to bring this, to do a Tales from the Sea later this year, and to bring this whole conversation into a wider thing. And I feel like maybe from that we could bring it Tales from the Land and the Sea together as one, but all in good time. I get ahead of myself a little bit. Let me just get back to emailing properly. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, do you feel like there's anything else to say before we close with a story?
No, I don't. I think we've covered most of it.
And I just want to say thank you to Hugh for holding this space with us. He sat with me doing the cards this morning, and he's joined us here for the second half of this episode, sitting with Sully and listening and holding this beautiful heart of listening, which we've talked so much about. And John and I talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And it's nice that Hugh doesn't even really want to say hi. He just wants to be here. And it's really lovely to have him here. So thank you.
I'm here to listen.
Yeah, thank you.
As we are with these stories.
Yeah, it's really fitting. So thank you both, and all of the beautiful people who've been participating and are going to continue participating. And I'm going to close with a story from a book that's transformed my life, actually. Clarissa Pinkola Estes' The Woman Who Run with the Wolves, and bringing that wildness back. And I feel like that's part of this process, you know, sitting here and being with the wildness of all the sounds that have come up, and the dogs barking at the cat and jumping to come out, and we're being with the wildness, and we're not polishing it. I'm not going to edit these out. This is life, and this is what this book has helped me embody in my life as a woman. And this is the first story of this book, and I think it sings to what we're doing, because I think we're singing this new old way into existence. We're tending to the flame of this fire. We're stoking it with our passion and with our love and with our conversations and our food, and we're being with it. And I think it's such a gift to be part of this process with such wonderful people. I just feel in awe. It's just mind-blowing. So yeah, with that, we'll dive into La Loba, which is a Mexican story, and yet you find it in so many traditions. No matter what part of the world you go to, you'll hear of a similar story. So this is from, more specifically, the Great Mexico, or the Great Desert, which lies half in Mexico and half in the United States, as Clarissa Pinkola Estes was moving through. And she says there's stories from Texas of La Loba girl, and the Aztec stories of twin orphans being breastfed by a she-wolf, and
really, twin orphans?
Yeah.
That's Romulus and Remus.
Yeah, it's a Roman one too, but it's also here in the Aztec tradition. And then there's also old Spanish land grant farmers and Pueblo people of the southwest who talked about to restore the connection between humans and animals, and talk about this bone woman. And she said this is the story when she met the bone woman. There is an old woman who lives in a hidden place that everyone knows in their souls, but few have ever seen. As in the fairy tales of Eastern Europe, She seems to wait for lost or wandering people and seekers to come to her place. She is circumspect, often hairy, always fat, and especially wishes to evade most company. Can't say I blame her. Another misanthropist joining this discussion. She is both a crower and a crackler, generally having more animal sounds than human ones. I might say she lives among the rotten granite slopes in Taratumara, Indian Territory, or she is buried outside Phoenix near a well. Perhaps she will be seen travelling south to Monte Alban in a burnt-out car with the back window shot out. Or maybe she'll be spotted standing by the highway near El Paso, or riding shotgun with truckers to Morelia, Mexico, or maybe walking to market above Oaxaca with strangely formed bows of firewood on her back. She calls herself by many names: La Huesiera, the bone woman; La Trapetera, the gatherer; and La Loba, wolf woman. The sole work of wolf woman, La Loba, is the collecting of bones. She collects and preserves especially that which is in danger of being lost to the world. Her cave is filled with the bones of all manner of desert creatures: the deer, the rattlesnake, the crow.
The wood pigeon.
But her specialty is wolves, as Pippi stalks towards us and Sully sits guard in the garden. She creeps and crawls and sifts through the montañas, the mountains, and the arrieros, the dry riverbeds, looking for wolf bones. And when she has assembled an entire skeleton, when the last bone is in place and the beautiful white sculpture of the creature is laid out before her, she sits by the fire and thinks about what song she will sing. And when she is sure, she stands over La Criatura and raises her arms over it and sings out. That is when the rib bones and leg bones of the wolf begin to flesh out and the creature becomes furred. La Loba sings up more and more of the creature as it comes into being. Its tail curls upwards, shaggy and strong, and La Loba sings more, and the wolf creature begins to breathe. And still La Loba sings so deeply that the floor of the desert shakes, and she sings, and the wolf opens its eyes and leaps up and runs away down the canyon. Somewhere in its running, whether by the speed of its running, or by splashes its way into the river, or by the way of a ray of sunlight or moonlight hitting it right in the side, the wolf is suddenly transformed into a laughing woman who runs free toward the horizon. So remember, if you wander the desert or this landscape where the tales from the land emerge, it is near the sundown, and it is near sundown, and you are perhaps a little bit lost, as we all are, and certainly tired, which we all are, that you are lucky, and we are lucky, for La Loba may take a liking to us and show us something of the soul. And I deeply think La Loba is present with us in this whole process, because here in the Irish tradition we might say she is an Cailleach, and she's been here since the start of this conversation. We talked about the Cailleach in the first episode, and it makes me think here that we're singing back alive those wolves that Cromwell wiped out, to wipe out the passion and strength of the Irish people. And not that we've lost it, but sometimes we're afraid to grasp it and feel our own power. But this is our invitation to become powerful and create and co-create this holistic, well, restorative, regenerative future for all of the plants, animals, humans, waterways and lands of this earth. And that's our invitation. Will we heed the call? I think we already are. Thank you for your listening ears.
Thank you, Mel. Beautiful story. And thank you everyone for listening.
Sloan.